Absolutely, they are. And I'll tell you who else is brilliant. The lovely Dr. Sandra Lean, who's going to be joining us right now. Sandra's been on with us many times before. And well, not many times, but a few times. And we like her. We love her joining us round here. Morning, Sandra.
Good morning. I don't know what was happening there.
Wonderful to see you. Absolutely wonderful. Do you know what I did last night? Again, it must have been the second or third time now I've watched it. I watched, what is it? Death in a Small Town. I think, yeah, it's still available on Catch Up on Channel 5. I implore everybody to watch it if you can. It's about, quite honestly, the miscarriage of justice that is Luke Mitchell. They don't say that, but they're quite clear that they really believe that Luke was stitched up good and proper. For those who don't know, Luke Mitchell was convicted of the murder of Jodie Jones, his girlfriend of 5-6 months. He was 14 when it happened. He was 16 when it was convicted. It happened just outside Edinburgh in Scotland in 2003. 4 people found Jodie, but only Luke was taken in as a suspect. Sandra has been all over this pretty much from the get-go, haven't you? You've written a book about it. But, you know, Sandra, what I was thinking about last night is that there was such an abundance of DNA at the crime scene. And yet there's been, it would have been a forensic scientist's dream if they had actually used it. What was the failure there with DNA?
To be honest, I think the bottom line was that they'd already set their sights on Luke. And if they'd gone further into the DNA, it would have shown them it wasn't him. The sample on Jodie's T-shirt, a full DNA sample from male bodily fluids, was from her sister's boyfriend. And they go and hand him an innocent explanation for it. You know, there's examples like this all the way through the case. And I do believe that it was a simple case of they didn't found their case on DNA because they couldn't have won their case on DNA. It would have. That's my feeling now.
Now that's interesting, because the great thing about time, and I should say this poor man, imprisoned at 16, he's now 36, been in for 20 years. It was a life tariff, but minimum 20 years. He must be due an appeal. He has always protested his innocence throughout. He doesn't, I think he wants to leave exonerated. He doesn't just want, to leave. He wants to be exonerated because I truly believe with you. When I first started looking at this, I was uncertain. Now I'm in no doubt that this is an innocent man. This is absolutely an innocent man. And so here's the thing. We found out some new things recently, right? What is this nonsense to do with DNA samples not even being tested on Jodie? How could that have happened? And we're talking about a young girl that was mutilated so badly that in the documentary, Sandra, you describe her as almost being decapitated.
Yes, horrific injuries, beyond description, really. As the guys in the documentary said, that scene would have been an absolute bloodbath, and there's no blood. I mean, just start with that one. There's no blood on Luke. There's very, very little blood at the scene. Anyway, the end of last year, a very, very brave whistleblower within the police let us know that the police were destroying the evidence. Now, it's 19 years, 1 week from today, 19 years since Luke was finally arrested at the age of 15, okay? And like you say, he's protested his innocence all of that time. And we have made it clear, we will go after appeal, review, whatever it takes to get them to re-examine this case. So after the documentary, we made it clear we were going for an independent review. We handed a petition to the Scottish Parliament. It was very, very clear we were going for another review. And then we find out that the police have started destroying the evidence 3 years earlier than they were allowed to, with no particular reason for doing so. So, of course, we jumped on it and we get some explanations. So the Crown Office, the Procurator Fiscal's Office in Scotland says, we gave the police permission to return some items that were not on the indictment as part of the original case. And then the police come back and say, no. They told us we could destroy some of the evidence, not on the original indictment, but oh dear, we made a mistake and we destroyed it all. Oops.
I mean, I can't even fathom. Let's be real here. Let's call it for what it is. This was a media and police stitch up. That's what it looks like to me as a journalist, because it seems quite clearly right from the very first day they decided that Luke was their man. And for the fact that 4 people found Jodie, and I'm so sorry to Jodie because she's not had justice in this either. Absolutely. Right? So 4 people found Jodie where she'd been absolutely savaged. Her hair had been pulled out by the roots. She'd been strangled. I'm not even going to go into the graphic details because it is horrendous, absolutely horrendous. It was a frenzied attack. 22 wounds to her face and throat, if I've got that right. And it looked very ritualistic. It was a very bizarre scenario. And as you say, there was other people's DNA, which they found reasons for. So, for example, her sister's boyfriend, they said that Jodie was wearing his T-shirt. That was how they felt able. Is that correct?
It's worse than that. They said she was wearing her sister's T-shirt. And that's why her sister's boyfriend's DNA was on the T-shirt. I mean, it just gets further and further away.
Wow. I mean, that is shocking. And obviously you've been on before with Scott, who's also written a book about this. And what Scott talked about was another person altogether who showed up at his flat, who's now dead, covered in there was wounds and everything, like just the day after. What was his name? Can you remind me?
Mark Kane.
That's it, Mark Kane. What do you think about Mark Kane?
My take on Mark Kane is he definitely should have been investigated. He was Scott brought him to police attention on day 2 of the investigation. Scott was made out to be a liar for many, many, many years. And then I got the case papers and everything Scott said was right there in the case papers. He did take this guy to the police. They did tell this guy just to go away because they were busy. They'd get back to him. And then they never did.
Right. Okay. And the thing is that people do need to go back to the start to see how this has happened to Luke, because the wider search around revealed male DNA in a condom, for example, fresh semen in a condom. How could they not have pursued that, Sandra? I can't get my head around it.
They couldn't find the person whose semen was in the condom. They couldn't find him.
But we know it wasn't Luke. It wasn't Luke.
Yeah. He wasn't on the database. However, and this is where it gets really bizarre, they were in this guy's house the day after the murder and didn't know he was the guy that had left the condom. What are the chances? It shows you how little investigation was actually going on. They were in his house for another matter regarding one of his brothers. They didn't even ask about other males in the house, or where they'd been, or what they were doing. Now, these houses are overlooking the crime scene.
Well, this is interesting. Let me read you some of these comments. Stephanie says, sounds to me they know who did it and they are covering up. Are they covering up for one of their own? Whoever the cover-up is for could be because they effed up and not the person who did it. That's the other thing, of course, is don't forget, they might not be covering for a person. They might actually be covering their incompetence or their desire to target Luke. Right. And certainly the destroying of evidence 3 years ahead of schedule would suggest that something deeply untoward has taken place. Craig Campbell says this is too close to home for me to comment online anymore. Craig lives in the area. Yeah. And that's the thing. Let's not forget that this is, a beautiful area. You'd never expect something like this to happen in the area. How has it impacted the area, do you think, over the generations?
For the first possibly 18 years, blanket belief in this area, almost blanket belief in this area that Luke was the killer, and anybody standing up for him, or for his mum, anybody saying that he was not responsible was essentially as bad as him. Oh. So you need to understand that the media coverage was unbelievable and all negative. This lad was turned into a monster overnight.
He was monstered.
Yeah, and
he absolutely was monstered. And one of the things that you corrected me about, because it's so important that they used it so often, was this whole idea that he was satanic, that he was a goth. And as you rightly said to me, it was actually Jodie who was much more into that scene than Luke was. But that was the way they portrayed him, wasn't it? And that fitted their narrative against him, didn't it?
Yeah, they portrayed him as into dark practices and evil and, you know, satanic panic. We see it over and over again. What worries me is there were pictures of Luke in the media from the age of 15, from the 15th of August 2000.
That's my birthday.
Oh, sorry.
That's quite weird. Okay, synchronicity. Yes, go on.
You can see from these pictures that this boy is not a goth.
Right.
That people were denying the evidence of their own eyes because the hype was so intense.
He looked more like a skater boy to me. I don't know. You know, that's what he looked like, which is as far away from a goth as you're likely to get. Yes. Laura says the tide is turning, I hope. Do you see some light at the end of this very long tunnel for Luke?
We do now. After we found out about the evidence destruction, it took us 3 months to find out if everything was gone or if there was anything left. They stalled and stalled and stalled. And then just a few weeks ago, we got the lists of what was gone and what was left. And unbelievably, some of the forensic samples survived.
Wow.
But what's incredible about them is, firstly, there's a missing, or rather a hidden file. There's a bunch of DNA and forensic evidence that has never been released to anyone.
Any idea what's in that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We have forensic samples that are labelled semen and sperm heads on articles of clothing, on Jodie's body. It was very difficult, but the original forensic samples, forensic reports were so poorly labelled that it was like putting a jigsaw together to find out what was what. And then we get these back and they're even worse. Some of them are not labelled at all. So it took me 3 weeks to go, right, that must be this and that must be that. And that's where we pieced together that many of these have never seen the light of day in 20 years.
Do you know, the thing is, Luke's case is capable of putting the entire Scottish establishment on trial, from the media to the judiciary to the police, etc. Trudy wants to know, how is Luke doing today?
Luke is amazing, as always. He's very, very, very strong. He has very set ideas about how he wants to take his case forward. And although he's been silenced for all these years, he has always said, when the time comes, we will put everything in the public domain. Now, for many, many years, we couldn't do that in Scotland. For me to put case papers out, I'd be breaking the law. Luke has now, I mean, he said for years, but he's now saying the time is now. Every time we see something, we have his permission to go public with it. So yes, we found the samples. Yes, they were hidden. No, at the moment, they don't count as new evidence, even though nobody's ever seen them, because they will come back and say, well, until they're tested and we know the results, they won't be evidence. The problem we have now, and I'd just like to pop this in, I know we're short.
Oh, no, you say what you need to say, my friend.
What we have here in Scotland, the Lord Advocate is the highest legal mind in the country. She makes the decisions about everything. She is married to the man who prosecuted Luke all those years ago.
Whoa.
She is the person who rejected the 25,000 signature petition asking for a review of the case on the basis that she didn't believe there was anything wrong with the case. She believed that the conviction was safe. And here's where we are today. She is also the person who will make the final decision about whether those samples are released for testing or not.
Oh, no. That's not, that can't possibly. Unreal, says Luggerbugs. Of course it's unreal. That doesn't even make sense.
Yep.
So we're talking, I mean, this is literally somebody who is closely, deeply, intimately involved with somebody who was originally involved with the case, gets a final say on what happens to Luke now. That makes no sense. Is that even allowed?
But it's absolutely allowed in Scotland, because the Lord Advocate is the highest legal authority. Now, she could stand aside and have, for example, the Solicitor General take the decision. She's done it in other cases.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Opportunities to stand aside in this case and has not taken them. I make no claims about that.
Sure.
I leave it to people to decide for themselves what they think.
Well, I'll tell you what they think. First, I'm going to give you some comments here. Gummy says conflict of interest, surely. Michelle says complete conflict. Yes, indeed, absolutely. Craig says, once they release him, what use will an appeal be on his original sentence if the evidence is deleted and binned by the police? Well, exactly. They are literally covering their tracks right now. Beverly says, Bev, Bev's a regular rise around here. Bev says Cardiff 3, M25, Ollie Campbell, Luke. We need to get justice for Luke and Jodie. And that is the point. There's two people here who haven't got justice, right? Because, Jodie is dead, but we still have an absolute need to nail who killed this poor child. Do you think there was more than one person involved?
Potentially. That's as much as I can see. I always base my opinions on the factual evidence in front of me. And the most I can say that it is potentially. Certainly, there's more than one person involved in covering for the murderer. That's for certain. Was there more than one person actually there at the crime scene? Potentially. That's as far as
I understand. I absolutely understand. Catherine said he was an innocent bairn being used as a scapegoat. And I think anybody watching this, anybody who actually looks into the details of the case, there's something wrong with you if you don't conclude that. To me, it is as clear. And you know what it's like, don't you, Sandra, is as the years go by, all the scales fall away of all the arguments, the obfuscation, and what's left is just the bare facts. And the bare facts do not bear out that Luke Mitchell is responsible for the murder of Jodie Jones. That's the reality.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, it took us years to find out, for example, that from the off, the police had been pointed in the wrong direction. They'd been told that Luke left with Jodie at tea time and they hadn't seen her. Well, that wasn't true. But by the time they got there and it's mayhem because the body's been found, in their minds, this lad's saying he didn't see her, but he left with her at tea time. He didn't. But already the investigation's off in the wrong direction. And here we are, it's 20 years on the 30th of June this year, 20 years. And still we have all of these questions. And now we have even more. What's in those samples?
Right, absolutely. Thora says, join us in the Facebook group. Absolutely. What's the Facebook group called? Thora, tell us in the comments and we will get that promoted. Yes, it does remind me also of the Madeleine McCann case, Craig, in many respects, because again, it is that establishment intervention. We stand with Luke Mitchell. What's the group called? Yes, we're going to find that out. Don't you worry.
I'll send the group details.
Yeah, and so they completely basically discarded 25,000 signatures, right?
Well, maybe they did, but the Scottish Parliament currently is imploding, as some people would be aware.
Yeah.
I think that's probably an understatement.
Understatement, because if you have your garden dug up, something is very wrong, right?
Yeah. But our plan, now this date is not set in stone, so people please check back in with us. 6th of May, we are planning a new protest outside the Scottish Parliament, once again, very peaceful, to say, we know, we're here, we're not going away. In the week prior to that, our plan is to resubmit the petition to the new Parliament, to the new MSPs, and say again, you need to look at this. We do, unfortunately, have the same Lord Advocate, but we can try again. And just say, you cannot dismiss that many people that easily.
Right.
We're not going away.
Right, absolutely. And my opinion, and I'm entitled to it, I absolutely believe it's a conflict of interest between what's going on. And let's name them, shall we? So they are, let's give them, what are their names? Oh, here we go. Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain and her husband, Lord Alan Turnbull. He was Luke's prosecutor. And so it is absolutely my opinion, my firmly held belief that this is a very serious conflict of interest, that those two people are involved with this decision to do with Luke Mitchell. Sandra, thank you for your stunning work on this. You never give up. Yes, stand together with Luke Mitchell Facebook group, says Thora Allen. And listen, just always keep us updated. You're always welcome back on Rise until Luke's finally released. Right.
And then I'll bring him along as well.
Wonderful. We love to hear that. Happy Easter to you. Take good care of yourself, everybody. The wonderful Dr. Sandra Lean. Take care, Sandra. God bless you. Wonderful. I love it when people are just so prepared to fight for those who can't necessarily fight for themselves.